Good morning, everyone. We'll give it a second to get everyone from the waiting room inside. Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Our remote media availability around Halloween tips, tricks, and treats. And our participants for today, we have Dr. Eric Brantz, Chief Medical Officer for CDPHE, Dr. Chris Nyquist, Pediatric Infectious Disease Specialist and Medical Director of Infection Prevention and Control from Children's Hospital, and Dr. Rachel Herlihy, State Epidemiologist for CDPHE. My name is Heidi Bosk and I'm your moderator. We're going to go ahead and start with the presentation and then we will end with a Q&A. So if you can hold your questions until the end, that would be wonderful. And to start us off, let's go to Dr. Brantz.
Good morning, everyone. And as always, thanks for coming and being here. You're doing such important work in communicating with our communities about how to live safely during the time of COVID. Now, Halloween is my wife's favorite of the holidays, and I know it is for many others. And so it'll be important for us to be sure that we are celebrating Halloween or enjoying Halloween, taking a break from the stress of COVID and doing it in a way that is safe. Excuse me. I think it's also worth mentioning that the next 2 weeks is going to be particularly important to help us identify what kind of a Halloween celebration we'll have. So remember to follow all of our basics about washing hands, keeping distance, in particular over these next 2 weeks, so that we don't find ourselves during a bad phase of the COVID pandemic by the end of this month. The good news, of course, is that we've learned a lot over the last 7 months about how to get together and do social things, yet do it in a safe method. Next slide. As you know, we now have a dial that helps us understand behavior and safety in our communities. And the dial has 3 broad areas of focus. It looks at the number of cases that have occurred in the last 2 weeks, the positivity rates for COVID testing in the community, and whether there's a decreasing or stable number of hospitalizations. And our communities across the state are at different places on that COVID dial. And not surprisingly, the activities we'd recommend during this holiday of Halloween will be reflected by where we're at in these different dial settings. Here you will see a couple of slides that will just remind us that our approach for celebration should really be tuned into the dial. For example, for those counties or areas that might be in a severe setting, we would, of course, having people stay home, and we'd be looking to fun activities for the family that can be done from the home setting. When we move into the safer at home levels, where we have 3 different levels, each of these sets of suggestions are really looking at what might be possible and doable depending on where we are. Next slide, please. As you can see, we can open up a little more as things are more safe for our neighborhoods. Think about the basics. Remember that we need to keep our distance. We need to wash our hands. We need to stay home if we're sick. And in that context, what would make sense for your community, your family, and your neighborhood? Making plans now for how you'll celebrate Halloween based on where you are on the dial framework is the best way to prepare for the end of the month. Next slide. When we think about organizers of events, of course, we want to focus on doing as many activities as outdoors as possible. Pumpkin patches, corn mazes. We know how to do these things in a safe way. Haunted houses might need to be transformed into haunted forests or other outdoor events when possible. In general, of course, outdoor and indoor events should be following our local orders and restrictions as we make plans for those. There are specific things like using one direction flow of participants and being sure that people stay home if they're sick that can be very helpful. Next slide. This is the season of masks, and some masks, of course, during COVID pandemic are going to be better than others. The Phantom of the Opera mask that isn't covering your mouth, the Jason hockey mask with its openings, but neither of these are good ideas or considered appropriate for wearing a mask. Be sure to choose masks for Halloween that have multiple layers of cloth and cover the nose and the mouth, like this one does from A Nightmare at Christmas, I think. Next slide. So as communities are thinking about the best way to celebrate this Halloween season, we would recommend that you plan things with your family, plan things that are local to your neighborhood, that you are thinking of how to best celebrate in a safe way outdoors, making sure that you're aligning your plans with local guidance based on the dial so that you're protecting yourself and others. Even with outdoor events, we have to be reminding ourselves that our ultimate goal is to keep everybody safe in the community. And as such, we should be careful about how we interact and choose the safest options. Next slide.
Great. And with that, I think we're going to take it over to Dr. Nyquist.
Yeah, hi. Thanks very much for allowing me to speak about the benefits of trick-or-treating and how to change it to a positive experience versus focusing on you can't go trick-or-treating or a negative experience. And it's really modifying that for the kids and families that we work with at Children's Colorado. And so the ideas that we really think about is how do you stay within your own bubble of who the kids and parents are interacting with. And so some of that is staying in your own neighborhood where the kids are playing together. Having that communication with your neighborhood about what's going to happen on your block. How are you going to have a safe trick-or-treating experience where kids are able to socially distance, they're able to wear masks, people are washing their hands. And that creativity that really kids love with the whole idea of what Halloween means to them. Is there a way to have a large tube that the candy comes down and they catch the candy? Having little buckets that they don't have to put their hands in to grab candy that are cute little plastic bags. How do you do this with keeping an appropriate distance? One of the ideas that some folks have is a trunk or treat with your school pod. And so your school pod kids may be another kind of idea where you get together in a large public open space and the families are, providing candy for the kids and they're having a little parade and doing some videotaping. There's lots of great ideas, and innovation and creativity is really what we need to think about with trick-or-treating. Next item. Next slide, please. So it can be a little different this year for Halloween 2020, but it can still be fun. And planning ahead really is important. One of the things that at Children's Colorado we're known for is having a large flash mob with 100 of our team members, but we're actually going to be doing videotapes of those kind of dances and songs and finding out ways to provide fun for kids within our settings. So planning ahead, keeping an idea on what the spread of COVID is in your immediate community, doing the standard precautions that we talk about, wearing masks, don't come out when you're sick, washing your hands, trying to stay, socially distanced, and being flexible. And I would say from the pediatric perspective, really focusing on how you can make this a fun, positive experience while we live through the pandemic and still enjoy this holiday and really make this one to remember. Next slide.
Great, thank you all so much. So we're going to move into our Q&A portion of the presentation. And for this, those of you who are veterans, go ahead and use that raise hand function in the at the bottom, and I will call on you. And if you could say which outlet you're with and who you are before your question, that'd be wonderful. Yes, Amber Joe Cooper, I'm going to go ahead and start with you.
Hey there, I was wondering, do you anticipate an uptick in cases and hospitalizations due to these Halloween festivities this year?
This is Rachel. I can take that question. So we have noted increases that have occurred in the state around other holidays. So the 4th of July holiday, we did see an increase in cases associated with that, probably due to decreased social distancing. And then the same thing around the Labor Day holiday, though around Labor Day, we also saw increased transmission on college campuses. So there's a number of factors, I think, at play for the increase we're seeing right now. I think it's too soon to know what level of impact we might see on overall disease transmission due to holiday activities. But of course, that's part of the reason that we are sharing this guidance and sharing this information with all of you and with the public to make sure that individuals are making good decisions and considering the potential risks to increasing transmission that could occur by certain Halloween activities. And it's why we're encouraging lower risk activities as alternatives to traditional trick-or-treating or large gatherings that might more often happen in other years around Halloween.
Great, thank you. Oh, and please forgive me, guys, I forgot to mention, if you have any questions that are on a different topic than Halloween guidance, please feel free to send those over to media_info@state.co.us, and we'll help get you some answers. Now let's take it over to Taylor.
Hello, Taylor Summers for NBC News Radio. I had a question for Dr. Nyquist about just door-to-door trick-or-treating. I've seen like some suggestions in other states that I looked at it and I was like, wow, that seemed almost a bit excessive, with kids hand sanitizing themselves in between each door and that sort of thing. Can you elaborate on how it could be potentially safe to do trick-or-treating door to door for kids this year?
I think I'd go back to the principles that we talk about. So one is knowing what your community is, and that's why the suggestion for a safer way to do door-to-door trick-or-treating is within your neighborhood block or your little bubble of friends and families that you have, instead of the unknown door, which kids trying to get as much candy as possible, fielding the entire neighborhood is a challenge for lots of exposure, potentially close exposure to people that you don't know. I would say the other counterpart is that for those who are folks who are giving candy out, what's a safe way for them to participate in Halloween? And is that a way for them to have little bags of candy at the end of their walk and to take pictures of kids from afar? But there's ways to utilize all the principles that we have with this pandemic and keep people safe on both ends of that. But that's why I think the focus on an alternate way of thinking about these smaller bubbles and smaller groups of people for the old classic door-to-door may not be the right thing for each community, but you might be able to do a modified version.
Great, thank you. Other questions? While we're waiting on any potential questions, I may throw out to our speakers. Do you have anything you'd like to share about maybe what you're planning on doing for the holiday? Dr. Hurley, I know you had a really great idea for your family.
Sure, I'm happy to share our family's plans. So I have a 9-year-old daughter, and she is doing school from home right now, but we are moving between a couple of homes with some close friends to kind of share the burden of doing online school together. And so our plans are to go to a nearby park, and the parents are going to hide candy in the park, and kids are going to have sort of a cross between Easter and Halloween with a Halloween candy hunt in the park. And then we'll spend some time in our backyard having a little bit of a celebration afterwards with just the small group of kids that she's routinely in contact with.
I love that. Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Yes, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. If you could say your name and what outlet you're with.
Good morning. My name is Teresa Bagdell, and I work for the Southern Ute Indian Tribe in southwestern Colorado. My question is this, and I posted it in the chat, but are you guys planning on doing similar presentations on other upcoming holidays such as Thanksgiving and Christmas? I understand there might be some redundancy in the material, but I was just wondering if those holidays will be covered as well. Thank you.
Great. Well, while I'm not fully sure on upcoming plans for media avails, I know that Dr. Hurley, you spoke yesterday kind of about modeling and looking ahead to the future. So I believe that it is on the radar. If any of our experts have anything to add, please let me know.
Yeah, this is Rachel. I can add a little bit to that. So we certainly are.
Oh, sorry, Dr. Hurley. I think I accidentally muted you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sorry, that was my fault.
Okay, no worries. So as Heidi mentioned, we are, looking forward to Thanksgiving and the winter holiday season, trying to anticipate, what potential risks might look like around gatherings that might occur at that time. We know that all holidays in the next couple of months are going to look very different, just as they have in the past few months, than they have in previous years because of some of the challenges presented by COVID. And so we will certainly be talking more and more about risks associated with travel, risks associated with gatherings, and as we're doing for Halloween here, trying to come up with some useful strategies to minimize the risk around those gatherings, and ensuring that people have the opportunity to celebrate in the safest way possible. So more to come on all of those other holidays as well.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? All right, well, before we close this out and I send you all on your merry way for the day, do our presenters have any final thoughts that they'd like to share? Any additional tricks or treats that you would like to share with the group before we close out?
This is Rachel. Nothing else from me, but thank you to everyone for sharing this information.
Wonderful. Well, we appreciate your time. We hope everyone has a safer, enjoyable Halloween. And if you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to send those to media_info@state.co.us, and we're happy to look into